So, Albert Graef, Meet the Cat, Pd-L2Ork, and its new cross-platform version, Purr Data, also written with Ivica, Bukvic, and Jonathan Wilkes.
Thank you very much. And first confession I have to do, no Faust this year. Jan, sorry about that. I got sidetracked. And well, maybe a little bit at the end, but just as an aside. And the second confession is, obviously, this is a joint paper with Ico and Jonathan, and I'm probably the worst person to give this talk because Ico has written Pd-L2Ork. Jonathan has done all the GUI work, and I helped a bit with that, but I probably won't be able to answer every technical question about the implementation, but the idea was that this was already presented, an earlier version of this paper, at PDCon 2016 in December in New York. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend that, so Ico gave the talk there, and Jonathan didn't want to come over. Ico was at 9, but couldn't make it to luck, unfortunately. And so here I am. And still the idea was to also give to the Linux audio crowd, which has some intersection with the PD crowd, obviously, to get the news out about this new version of PD, which has some features which make them, at least in my opinion, very good for teaching, maybe also in the end to be used on stage. But maybe that's enough of the explanation for now. So let's jump into it. Last session, last talk, so you probably hungry. For those of you who've never heard about PD before, I know there are many people here walking among you who are using PD, either in secret or even on stage. We've seen that last evening. So for those of you who don't know it, it's a kind of patching environment. So it's similar to Max. It's actually written by the same person who originally invented Max, but it's an open source replacement also, or alternative to Max. Open source, in this case, it's actually not free in the Free Software Foundation sense, free software, but it's open source in the OSI sense. So it's at least the core PD is covered by the 3-clause BSD license. So what we have here is a graphical data flow programming environment. And that might sound a bit abstract. It is. This kind of programming was invented, well, I wasn't really following it back then, but if I remember what I've read about it, it was invented in the 1970s. So it didn't really catch on as a general programming paradigm, but it became very successful in digital signal processing in general and also in computer music in particular. So PD is specifically geared towards real-time interactive computer music and multimedia applications, obviously. It has a rock-solid real-time audio engine, which has the special property other than other environments of this kind, that it's entirely deterministic. So if you have the exact timing when the events are coming in, you can be sure that about the outcome. That multi-threaded environments don't have that property. It's sometimes also criticized because that makes some things more difficult than, let's say, as in Max. For instance, if you want to load stuff in the background. But in the end, Miller has taken some very precise design decisions that it should be that it should work that way. So that's how it is. It runs on Linux, Mac, and Windows. And there are various community flavors around. So the longest running has been the so-called PD Extended. I've seen that used everywhere, including here at JMU. And so that's actually what we're going to talk about today. So I have on the big screen. Sorry about the resolution. This laptop has a funny resolution, so I couldn't do the bigger 1280 resolution, and we're running at 1024 times 768, unfortunately. But at least you should be able to see the SAGIs on the left. So up there is the current PD version. Down there is the current, but well, basically 2013, 2014, because then development stopped there. Version of PD extended. They look rather similar, but the extended version has some more visual cues, which makes it easier to discern certain important features of objects. And on the right-hand side, you have Pd-L2Ork on top, and on the bottom with the bigger window. These are all the same scale. The bigger window with the zoomed-in view is the new version, which is Purr data. I have to say a few words about the name later. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any purring sounds, so we'll have to do those ourselves. So I have a very brief history. According to the legends, PD was born around 1996. We know that because, well, 2016 PDCon was dubbed to be in the 20th anniversary of PD. I think Miller isn't quite sure himself, but anyway, that's now set in stone, and it's still going strong. And even though some people may have complaints about the GUI of PD, it's also a very stable program and runs very well, as we've seen on stage yesterday. And the real-time engine is still being developed there. That's of critical importance, of course, and so there we go. PD extended, on the other hand, which was a kind of, well, you might say fork, but really it was a version of PD, which was put together by the community, but mainly Hans-Christoph Steiner, which was also running strong. It's the longest running variant of PD, but in 2013, or I think the latest commits were maybe in 2014, but I've got that date from ICO's part of the paper, that PD extended basically died. It's still there. You can still use it. There are packages that you can download, but it's not developed any further. So already in 2010, Pd-L2Ork started as a fork of PD extended, which is now in maintenance mode. And Purr data became basically Pd-L2Ork 2.0, you could say that. And that's an ongoing effort to bring, well, I could say maybe get Pd-L2Ork and thereby PD extended, on which it is based, into this new century. So continue developing it, continue improving the GUI, continue maybe exploring some features beyond what upstream PD does, which is the real-time stuff, which is very important, of course. But we also want to have a nice GUI, and that was the idea behind all of this. So that was already the idea that ICO started with when he developed Pd-L2Ork. Actually, that stuff might have just gone into PD extended, but apparently Hans-Christoph and ICO couldn't quite agree on the feature set. And so ICO rolled his own, and that became Pd-L2Ork. And I learned about this in Dave Phillips, by the way. Dave, if you're listening, hello. 2012 Linux Journal article. So Pd-L2Ork looked really very much like PD back then, but it's been coming a long way since, and I've started heavily using it since about 2013 at the Johannes Gutenberg University, which is where I teach. And I relied on it mainly as a vanilla replacement. Vanilla is the upstream PD version by Miller-Paquette. and mainly because of the improved GUI features and also because of the better editing, which is more user-friendly. So that's not because PD is bad, and we also don't want to have any fragmentation on PD, but well, in teaching, vanilla PD really lacks some features in the GUI which makes working with it and learning it much easier, and we have these in Purr data. And there were already quite a few of these features in Pd-L2Ork, and that's why I started using it. So the problem with Pd-L2Ork was that it only ever worked on Linux. Now, for us folks here, that's all right. I don't actually care too much about the Mac and Windows, but I teach musicologists, I teach musicians, I teach computer scientists, mathematicians who are all interested in music theory and also software to deal with this and want to learn about PD and so on. And they rarely run Linux, I have to say, to my great dismay, but that's just how it is. And yeah, my students are sitting in the back and they can relate to that. So what I'm setting out to do in my teaching is that I take cross-platform software, and I've solved most of this. Now that Ardo also runs on Windows, I've practically have the full tool chain on all three major platforms, but the one thing that wasn't coming over was PD. The vanilla version was there, of course, and that's what I then recommended to install, or maybe PD Extended, which is also available for all three platforms. But I really preferred Pd-L2Ork in teaching, and so I was really looking forward to having a version which would also work on non-Linux systems. And there were some roadblocks there. And then suddenly a guy, I don't know even where he lives, but he's from the United States, Jonathan Wilkes, started working on a Mac Windows port. I heard rumors about that on the DSys mailing list, which is the Pd-L2Ork mailing list. And then this thing became more concrete, and I suddenly had a download link and could try it out on the Mac. So this suddenly became a thing, and that's when I decided I really want to have this. But if we want to get it off the ground, because it was alpha status back then, there were many bugs, it wasn't really running all that well yet. Then I told Jonathan I maybe could help a little bit, and I would be willing to test the stuff and also do a test run with my students during the semester. Because to shake out the bugs, let's face it, a program like PD is quite complicated, and to shake out the bugs, there isn't anything better that you can do. So what I made is in winter semester 2016, I did an actual pilot run with Purr data at the Johannes Gutenberg Université at the computer music courses in 4 different courses at the same time. So that was a bit stressful. So it basically turned out to be a kind of code sprint for 4 or 5 months. And so I taught in the day or prepared courses, and in the night I was hacking and communicating with Jonathan to discuss, trying to understand the JavaScript sources and so on. So that has resulted, and I have to update the slides there once again, in 3 different releases now. So the initial 2.0 release. Remember that the version number 2 is just because it's the next version of Pd-L2Ork, not because we're so far ahead of PD or something like that, but just to keep the lineage clear. So we had a version 2.2 now. It's not bug-free yet. I must say that up front, but we're getting there, and I found it perfect, and I hope my students as well found it perfectly usable for teaching purposes. It didn't crash. Well, in the beginning it crashed sometimes, but by the end of the course it was really working very well. And so I think it's usable for teaching purposes right now. We need more people who really stress tested now, so while you might not want to go on stage with it just yet, but if people who work on stage and have very complicated patches test it, and we get some feedback when the GUI still crashes, the better the bug reports are, the quicker we can fix all that stuff. So because I know that you're all impatient, I've put up this slide right up front so that you can, are the slides available as PDF? Okay, so you can click on those links. I have packages, which I call the Johannes Gutenberg University packages for Arch. In the Arch, it's also in the Arch user repositories, of course. These are really, well, current. These are basically rolling release of Purr data. Ubuntu are the packages that I do next, so they are pretty much current Git versions. Not quite yet, because Jonathan, a few days ago did some bug fixes, which brought some very nasty new bugs. So, and I didn't have the time to look into that yet. So they're a bit behind, but we also have the packages that Jonathan himself releases from time to time, and as a one-stop shop, we have this page up on GitHub, which I made so that you have a place where you can go to and find everything, including a little tutorial. For those of you who know PD already, you should be able to be up and running in no time. And where the development happens, that's this GitLab instance of Jonathan himself. So if you want to submit bug reports or pull requests, please do it there. I haven't found a way to turn off that functionality on GitHub, because it's basically just our sales point, our outlet. But if you want to report bugs and maybe contribute stuff, then please do it on the GitLab instance. And if you want to build it yourself, be warned, that takes a while. So if you can use the binary packages, it is usually a good idea to do it. In this case, if they don't fit your system, then you have to build from source, which is a bit complicated, but it's described in the README. We still have to work on the build system, but we have lots of stuff on our to-do list still, but it works already. So there have been some goals, and let me see where I am with the time. Can I have a sign of quarter? 20 minutes, that's great. So we've had some goals, and some of the goals are just the general goals that already Hans-Christoph Steiner had with his PD extended version. So we wanted to have a better GUI. PD's GUI works perfectly well. That's something to be said, but it could be more convenient, and it could offer some more features. The second addition in both PD Extended, Pd-L2Ork, and Purr data now is that it has batteries included, so there are many extensions, and we also test these, so they're not all tested yet, but if you find anything that's not working, please just submit a bug report. We want to have everything that's included also actually working, also on 64-bit systems, which was the problem with PD Extended, that I think that the problems there were largely because, we obviously had to shift to 64-bit processors, and not all of the extensions had been ported yet. So then Ico needed or wanted some special features which were tailored for his Linux laptop orchestra, which brings me to the name, because Pd-L2Ork is named after L2Ork, which is the Linux laptop orchestra at Virginia Tech. And also Ico's original goal for Pd-L2Ork was to get bug fixes in there quicker, and we actually have some bug fixes. If it's a problem, if you need to be bug compatible with upstream PD, we also have a -legacy option which you can use to have the backward compatibility when you need it. So, but then why Purr data? Well, PD was cross-platform for a long time, but Pd-L2Ork wasn't. I already explained that. So we wanted to have a cross-platform version. And we could have gone, Jonathan could have just said, okay, I'm going to see that I get TK path and TCL Saint-Etienne, which were the two problematic modules there, ported over to Windows and Mac as needed. There are some binaries there. There's sometimes for Windows XP or ancient Windows versions, or there are ancient Mac binaries there. So there surely would have been some porting effort there. And then Jonathan obviously thought, as I'm thinking as well, that Tackle TK is really getting old these days. And it's chugging along, it's still there, and it works. But the extensions can sometimes support on other platforms, can be problematic, and TCL is not a very good programming language. Now, you could have concerns with other programming languages as well, but so Jonathan had different preferences, obviously. So in any case, Tackle is easy to use and easy to learn, but it has its limitations. So a switch to a better, more modern GUI, and also the language that controls the toolkit was in order. So we didn't really want to throw out everything. So the idea was to to really use an interpreted language because it offers a better environment, easier debugging and so on. But maybe it's just been a personal preference of Jonathan, so that he decided to use NWJS, which is the new name, well, if it's really a name, for Node WebKit, which is like Electron. Electron, probably many have heard of that before, but it was a bit better suited. It was more mature. It's older than Electron. And so he set out to reprogram the entire GUI of PD in JavaScript, and he's achieved that. And this then opened the possibility to utilize modern web technology, HTML5, CSS3, SVG, you name it, we have it all at our fingertips now, which is sometimes problematic with Tackle TK because just the libraries aren't there. And there are so many libraries available for JavaScript these days, you won't believe it. So what we kept, as before, is the communication via a socket. So messages, there's a socket-based communication. Basically, if we send something to the real-time engine, it's this kind of foodie language where I have forgotten again for what that stands for. And so the GUI and the GUI and the real-time engine are completely separate. So, and I put these two slides in there so that you can read it, because I will show the stuff anyway in the, or most of the stuff anyway in the demo that I'm about to start now, hopefully, if nothing crashes. And but I put that in the slide so that you can have the main bullet points there. What are the contributions that have been made by Pd-L2Ork and Purr data? So second part of name explanation, Purr data. Actually, well, it's because Jonathan liked the ring of it, and obviously it's a kind of pun on pure data. So you have to be very careful when you pronounce it. And so that's the time when I start the demo and see whether Jack is still up and running. And okay, pure data, there it is, Purr data. So that's how it looks like on Linux, and how it looks like on Mac, and how it looks like on Windows, because it's just Chromium, basically. You don't see it, that it's Chromium, running a JavaScript engine, and which runs the GUI. And as before, PD just is running in the background as a separate process. So let's take a look at, okay, there we got a nice icon there. So I hope that you have the entire screen. So this is actually something that's quite interesting because you can have an SVG graphic as a data structure element for those of you who know PD well. This is actually a data structure. It's in this subpatch. So what's running there is this struct there. You could also have it move, and you could actually turn this into an interactive game, which doesn't rely on any well, not really third party, but you don't need to use GAM for that. That's now in the data structure, so there have been some nice extensions there. We also have new help window. Of course, there are various versions around for that. The one in Pd-L2Ork was very capable, but a bit confusing. This one is so simple that you can't go wrong. Let me show some more of these SVG graphics. So now we actually should have sound as well. And of course it didn't work. You see? Yeah, sorry. I expected this to be a purr or maybe a roar, but that was Jonathan. Next time, please. So there we go. This is a very important feature, and I will, at the end of the demo, I will return to that because there's some cool possibilities there. And you can browse through your stuff here. There's the usual sections that you want to find in there. All the help patches still, PDDP for those in the know, the PD documentation format is still supported. So we have keyword searches and everything. And just to show you some of the other stuff, what's, at least from my point of view, what's important for me, let's take a look at this little synth patch here. So I just run through some stuff. You see that's not yet finished, so I need to look how many more minutes I have to finish that. Let's just go quickly through it. So you work with that like in PD. It looks very similar. One thing that you notice immediately, but you already know this from Pd-L2Ork if you've used that, we have those nice Bezier splines, so no max NV because of that. And what nice feature is the tidy up is totally different than in, I never understood what it does in vanilla PD, frankly. Right here you can just, because stuff is untidy, is that me? Okay, you do tidy up once and it will align everything, and it will also make the distances between all the objects. Hope I don't have any feedback in here, then I need to shut off the microphone. Well, okay, so now it's tidied, and let's connect. Well, obviously this voice distributing thing here, it's a voice allocation thingy there. We want to connect each of the routes outputs to these voices there, which are subpatches. And now in PD, I'd have to draw the individual cables. Here it's much simpler. I just select this as well and drag this outlet to this inlet, and you see it does all the remaining connections automatically. So this is called, ICO has termed this intelligent patching, which is quite convenient. We can do the same with the outlets, which are audio outlets, and then I just, to prove that this patch actually does something, let me pull up a MIDI player. YouTube, take notice, this is Bach, so he's long dead. So there we go now, and we got, maybe I should turn this down a bit. So just to prove that this stuff actually works, so you see a subpatch in there. You can also open it, and the nice thing about it, so much stuff where you have to type coordinates, widths, heights, and so on, in PD, numbers, which is hard for if you start out with it and you don't see, well, how am I going to resize these things? Here in Pd-L2Ork, you can just move. Let's say I want to move this over here, of course, and maybe make it a little bigger. So, and then that's just working like you'd expect. Then I can make this graph on parent area smaller. So if I'm not mistaken, Johannes, this still isn't in upstream in vanilla. You can do that, yes, but if I save it now and close this, I have it in all the patches and don't have to change everyone. It's now really in the graph and parent area. But maybe PD has adopted that change. So, but that's been in Pd-L2Ork a really long time. So, what else did I want to show? One thing that maybe you can't see that patch correctly. One thing that's really nice in Purr data, and that's really in Purr data, that you can zoom. You can zoom to fit to the page width or height. You can also, you have different zoom levels, not like in vanilla PD. So that's for teaching. That's really heaven sent. And what you also have here is infinite redo undo. So if I and now it's not working, of course. Let me try this. I knew that it would happen, and these things are totally off now. It actually did let me just briefly reload that patch and do some random changes there, or maybe show another patch. Yeah, that should be the last one. So let's just reload this one. Okay, so that's just something in the display bug that I discovered just today. So, but if you move stuff around or make connections or whatever you do, you can just go back with undo, or redo is what's the shortcut? That's Control-Shift-Z. So, and redo it. So I think that Miller has this on his to-do list for 0.48 to port this over from Pd-L2Ork and stuff like this. Yeah, since we're running out of time, let me keep it at that. And maybe, one thing I still have to show you. So let me stop this patch over here. The SVG stuff. So let me quickly load this up. This is a demo of coming attraction. So you can already do this. This already works. But we still have trouble with getting these packaged up as graph on parent subpatches. So then the scaling goes bonkers, and that's just like in standard PD. And then you suddenly have to recalculate everything. But we will get to that. So what you can do with these data structures and with these new drawing commands that Jonathan has added is create GUI elements without doing any programming. So apart from programming in PD. So if you can use PD and you know how these data structures work, you can do your own GUI elements. And that's, to demonstrate this, here's the inner logic of these three buttons here, not buttons, well, knobs, exactly, knob demo. And, well, you can draw them in different styles. So that's all just standard PD controls here. There's no hidden magic there. You can drag the controls. So there are various mouse events that you can react to. The actual drawing commands are in this subpatch here. So that's like it's usually done with data structures. So imagine that PD users can now like we've seen yesterday and also in the talks today. They often build really complicated user interfaces, and they can now build their own user interface elements as well. Of course, these kind of knobs are available already. I think they're in Moonlib or something, and they are the IAM GUI elements. But if you're not content with that and want to build your own stuff, then in PD you really have to program them in C, and a part of that, or most of it, probably in Tackle, and then you have to go beyond PD, which many users won't do because they just want to use PD. So that's a big thing there. So we expect that to become something where people can also share their own GUI element designs without having to program in C, and that's basically. I actually wanted to end this presentation with the Faust example, but since I'm running out of time, that's where we stand now. And the GUI port is basically finished. So you've just seen it. So that's already the complete GUI is all in JavaScript. And you might I know that some people don't like JavaScript or think it's a bad language. Maybe should have another look. I've been saying that as well, and I think that it's improved a lot. The problem that we have is that some of the externals still have a tackle GUI, which of course doesn't work anymore, which sends tackle commands in the C code to the GUI, and the Purr data will then report these commands so that we find out where there's stuff to be ported. So that still needs to be done, and we're also following upstream. For instance, I've recently ported Johannes' new loader in PD, which makes things load much nicer and more consistently. There's a bunch of bug fixes that still needs to be done. I think Jonathan is still fighting with some out-of-order foodie messages and stuff like that. And there are in some corners, there are some inefficiencies and plain outright bugs, which still need to be resolved, but we're working on that. A big area will be tackle concurrency. Make these SVG graphics really work as we want them to, so that you can package your own GUI elements up in graph on parent patches. And we need people from all kinds, users, bug reporters, authors who want to work on the help patches, and so on, and of course people who actually resolve bugs and send us pull requests. So I just wanted to get the word out at the Linux Audio Conference. It's kind of, well, I'm a bit, these are not my own feathers I'm showing here, but I've played a part in it, and I think it's a nice new version of PD, which could change the way we teach PD, and so that's probably the real positive note to end on. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them either now or later on. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot for your talk, Albert. We have time for questions, so yeah, here we go.
Oh.
No bad feelings. The first thing is there a way to get a minimal version of Purr data? Because I really don't want to get all the food, the shebang and whatever.
Yeah, I built, of Pd-L2Ork, I've actually had my original package builds for that, where just the vanilla, basically, and it's certainly doable.
So are there plans?
I don't have any ready-made packages of this kind, but I could provide them.
And so the other question would be, you were talking about the footy messages between GUI and...
Right.
And obviously, PD still sends stickle messages actually from the PD core to the GUI.
Right, exactly.
This has been replaced totally by footy messages, is it right? You're not
We're
sending
really
JavaScript,
doing
at least.
our own thing there, because we've sticked a bit to this foodie format, which goes from, I always forgot which one goes which way, but the basic idea is still the same, that you need to be able to send some messages to the core to inform it about GUI changes, and the core, on the other hand, calls into the tackle interpreter, in this case the JavaScript interpreter, to get certain things done in the GUI.
Yeah, my main question
Right.
actually is directed at the actual format you were using, whether that's abstracted away from whatever backend we are using.
Well,
so
it's still, for the one direction, it's still to send stuff to the core. It's still
That's just
it's
foodie, isn't
very
it?
similar to the original
Yeah.
foodie. We made some adjustments, but it's pretty much the same, and we don't have to keep compatibility there.
yeah,
So,
definitely. But
right.
do you or Jonathan at least plan to release something on that protocol? Because that would be interesting, actually, for
to document, you mean some
some paper for
some
for
paper,
instance.
yeah. Well, foodie is
Foodie is very simple. No,
Foodie is very
foodie is foodie.
No, I think you're right. We really need to write something about the implementation and the way the JavaScript works. And right now it's a bit ad hoc, that needs some refactoring. And I hope that I can get Jonathan to do that, because he's the guy who should do it, because he knows it in and out. I've read the JavaScript code, but I don't know all the corners yet. So yeah, there we go.
Hi, Albert. I hate to be talking about subjective stuff. I noticed that one of the things you've kept from PD is the god-awful font that's used for all of the GUI. Can you change the font in this now?
Yes, sure. I mean, like you can do in all PD versions, or do you mean the menu font?
I mean the font that's used for the entire GUI.
For the GUI, that's, I think, what was that, Bitstream Vera? That's what Jonathan put in there, but you can change that in the JavaScript also. It's not a big
Okay.
deal to change it there,
Okay.
if you don't like it.
Is Purr data compatible with high DPI screens?
Yes, it should be. I just can't show, but well, I have a screenshot of from a Mac with a Retina display. Let me try to bring that up, so you can find this. Yeah, there it is. So that's the same program running on a Retina display. I did that screenshot on my MacBook, and so it should work all right there. It does, for me at least.
And on Linux?
Pardon?
And does it work the same on Linux?
Yes, I mean, I don't really have a high, I have 1600 times 900, and it works very well there too. I mean, it's Chrome. So it it's not Chrome, it's Chromium. So it has basically the same features. The scaling of the fonts, you mean in the GUI, that's handled by your whatever desktop environment you use. You usually have a slider there where you can scale things in fonts or all graphical elements and so on. And it should adhere to that if Chromium does. So. TrueType fonts. Well, this is Bitstream Vera there. Yeah, it's Chromium. It's your browser basically.
Yes, but because if it is a bitmap font, then no.
We have, of course, we're using TrueType fonts here. We're not using bitmap fonts. Right. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. So let's make this bigger. That's how far it goes. And yeah, of course, you can also zoom it down until it's a bit hard to read, at least for me. So, okay. Do you believe me now? Okay, great.
One question that comes to my mind when I hear JavaScript-based desktop apps. There was this famous instance where a blinking cursor cost like 13% of CPU. usage in some text editor, which was not Atom, but one of the others. Once one of these JavaScript GUIs is sufficiently complicated, does it leave any room for the DSP part?
It might be hard to run it on a Pi 1. It's certainly, that's one of the downsides. I didn't go into that, but you find that discussed in the paper. Of course, there are downsides to using NWJS, and one is that it's heavy. It's at least much heavier than, those are pixels. You see the cat is made of pixels. It's not true type. But the framework is a lot heavier than Tackle-TK. That must be considered. I want to, when I come home, I want to buy a Pi 3 and really run it there and see how well it works. It's supposed to work there. Jonathan puts out packages for Raspbian, and I really need to try that. And so I don't have any first-hand reports on that. But we hope, Chromium runs on the Pi. I don't know how well it runs on the Pi 3. Did you have any experiences with that? No? So we'll have to find out. But for the moment, it's probably a better bet to use, at least a newer laptop or something to run it. Right.
Chromium is a fast-moving target, so they develop it very quickly, and it's also under heavy attack on the web. So they publish security patches every so often. And then you're using NW.js, which is basically a combination of Chromium and Node.js.
Right.
And Node.js is also a very fast-moving target. So I see here the Gefahr, the danger of you distributing known security holes that have long been patched in Chromium and Node.js.
We're updating the NW.js version very well. We're following not in lockstep, but we're updating, of course, the version we include in the packages, and you can always run the latest NW.js, and the APIs don't change all that much, except in some corners, of course, but. So I don't see that there's a big issue there.
Yes, I think in the past there have been sometimes when integrating changes in Chromium or in Node.js into NW.js took some time. Anyway, another question is, will it be possible in the future to extend the signal processing side of pure data with JavaScript?
Well, we're running Faust units on JavaScript. It uses a dialect, and so that's entirely possible, but not on our to-do list right now. It is actually feasible to run signal processing code at near native speeds on modern JavaScript engines.
So there's a Jesus effects external, which is based on Jesus effects. So you can write your DSP code in Jesus effects, which is a JavaScript-based small DSL coming from the Reaper world, I think. So you can write DSP code with JS on PD Vanilla, actually. So you don't even need Purr data for that.
Well, then we have it too. I mean, we're not really enemies, Johannes, so we just want to make a version that's a bit user-friendly for the beginners, especially. And also for me, I also enjoy using it, and the Zoom, actually, really, the Zoom capability alone is really makes this very useful for me, because in vanilla PD, there's one zoom level. You get huge objects or you get very small objects, and for my aging eyes, that's not good enough anymore. Maybe Miller can live with that. Maybe he has better eyes than me, but I can't. Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, Albert.
Thank you.